Hi there. Welcome to Nice Work If You Can Get It, Bold Strokes panel on what the main characters are, their professions are in our panelists' books. So we're going to have a fun time with this today. I've asked each one of my panelists to give me a complete resume. So we're going to go through our resumes first and then talk a little bit about books maybe. I'm just kidding. None of them sent me their resumes except for Kris. Bryant, who was always understands the assignment. So I appreciate that. And but what we're going to start off with real quickly is I'm going to have each one of these fantastic authors let us know what their careers have helped them in their writing with this, and a little bit of information about who they are and if they have a new book coming out maybe next month. So we'll start off with you, Lesley. How about you? What are you doing these days, and how has your career affected your writing?
Well, I used to work in mortgages. That didn't affect me one bit, except I used to write when there was no work to do and constantly got called out for doing it. But it was a case of, well, everybody else is on their phones talking to their family. I'm actually doing something important. So I got about 2 books written at work. Probably why we were all made redundant. But now I'm a full-time carer for my mom. She needs me at home, and that means that I can, as much as I can now, I can work on expanding my fantasy knowledge.
Nice. You know, I'm going to bet that most writers who started writing, if they didn't start their life off as a professional writer, which most of us have not done, have written a little bit at work, if we could. By show of hands, how many of us have written at work? Yeah.
Oh, I wish.
It's split half and half right there. Okay. How about you, Krystina? What have you done in your life and how has that affected your writing? What are you doing?
So actually 2 different main kind of career paths that I've had in my life have come very heavily into play in both of my books. My first book, Something Between Us, which is up here on the shelf behind me. Nice. That one was about 2 former military members who met. One was in the Navy and the other was in the Army, and they were both serving under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And like your hat, I actually served in the Air Force, but my wife was in the Navy when we met. She's in the Army National Guard now. So for that military background and understanding what it felt like to serve under Don't Ask, Don't Play played a huge role in that book. And then my current new release that just came out a couple weeks ago, Last New Beginning, also on the shelf on this side behind me, is about 2 women who work in commercial real estate. One is a commercial real estate broker. And so she does leasing for some of the nicest glass and steel office towers downtown. And then the other main character owns a general contracting company and is hired by the building owner to build out some of the spaces in there. So I wanted to write this particular book, Last New Beginning, because I think a lot of times when you read about real estate in books, it's always people selling houses. Because that's what people think when they think about real estate. And there's so many other facets of it that I find fascinating. I know I bore the hell out of my wife with it sometimes, but you know, there's like the sexy glass and steel office towers. You've got, you know, luxury apartments, low income apartments, industrial, some retail, and there's, I think, a lot of stories that can be told there with those as background. So we'll see how many I get to before I bore everyone to death. But so far, my goal is to bring commercial real estate into people's homes.
That is so awesome. That's so awesome. I think that everything that we do in our lives kind of comes out in our books and stuff. And so we talk about that. Kris, the only one who gave me their full resume, which was fascinating, and I'll be selling that on eBay later.
Good. Because my first job, I thought the first job was probably the most impressive. But actually, no, my job does not come into play at all. I work for an engineering company. I sell on eBay and I write. So I'd much rather not take what I do for a living and think about it even after the after hours, you know, when I have to write. I want to do something that I want to do. I mean, my job, it pays the bills. I want to write about something exciting and different. And so finding different jobs and different careers for my characters is always so much fun. So But I do get to write at work, and I do work from home a couple days a week. So when I'm not busy, maybe sometimes I get in a few words. So
It's nice work when you can do it, right?
right, exactly.
Karis, how about you?
I'll talk about what I'm doing right now. I am a referral coordinator at a psychology clinic. So it's very left brain, detail oriented, numbers and looking for patterns and things. And I teach horseback riding, and I'm the personal valet for about 20 horses that live right out that door. So I've got kind of a left brain job and a very physical job, and then writing is my more creative right brain. And I think it helps me to have that kind of balance and not have a day job that's similar to writing or that uses the same type of creativity, because then it's almost like you don't have a certain amount of energy for each type of job. So I kind of like having that balance.
That's nice. Yeah, that's an interesting dichotomy of what you do. So does it show up in your writing?
Definitely my experience with horses, I've written about them before. And then my time in school and things like that have come out, like with my university police romantic intrigues that I'm writing are set up at the University of Washington. So my jobs and my passions come out. I think more of my passions come out in my writing than some of the jobs I've had.
Oh, gotcha. How about you, Dena?
So for Unchained Memories, I have a degree in cybersecurity, and I worked in security, so I used some of that in that book. Also, it has some things to do with DHS, Department of Human Services. Actually, I've worked for them in the past, so I did use some of that knowledge. And then recently in A Spark in the Air, I ran a family-owned video business for quite some time, and Janie runs a cyber cafe. So I kind of pulled from that knowledge for that book. So yeah, I guess I have used some of the knowledge, not generally the same exact profession, but some of the knowledge. So
That's interesting. Okay. Well, we all have books coming out next month, right? So let's get into that. And first of all, we're going to hawk that, because that's, we want to tell people about our new books. So I'm going to go through, and I'm going to go in reverse order that we just talked about. And I'd love for you to show a picture of your book if you have your book with you. Krystina, I saw you pointing. You'll be doing this, right? But please, if you have it, show your book, and let's talk about the characters, what they're doing in your books. So Dena, we'll start with you since you were last on the last one.
So Spark in the Air, show that for All's Fair in Love and Wi-Fi. So Crystal has been tasked with going to a small town in Vermont and to bring them into the 21st century, to bring broadband and Wi-Fi into the little town. And Janie is the cyber cafe owner and part of the town board. And they don't seem to want to have broadband. It's not the first time they've tried it. So Crystal gets there and she doesn't realize how quaint the town is. And she begins to really like the town and understand the people and why they don't want broadband there. So yeah, and Crystal is pretty driven in her profession, and she gets promised a promotion if she makes this happen, and then she has to reevaluate what she really wants out of life, and Janie is, although she loves her cyber shack, she still has this inkling that maybe they should move forward. So those are the things that they're thinking about in their paths forward. So
very interesting. Coming from a telecommunications background, that sounds like right up my alley there.
Yeah. And then, I thought about that, and you might ask this question later, I don't know. I was up, we had one of these panels, and I was up at Queen Wilhelmina Lodge up here in Tallahena looking at the leaves, and I couldn't connect even through my phone. I had a wireless card, the lodge, I could connect for like 3 seconds and it would cut me off. And then I thought, wow, how do people survive without wireless or broadband, you know? And so that's kind of what spurred that on. So
Maybe there's a nefarious thing behind it. When you're on vacation, maybe you should be on vacation.
maybe so. Yeah.
Yes. Karis, how about you?
My book is Love and Lattes. And Taryn, one of the main characters, is a wedding planner. She does kind of unique weddings that are very tailored toward individuals. And the mayor of Sumner, a small town in Washington, hires her to plan his wedding. And he wants it at a cat cafe where he and his partner met. And so she goes to the cat cafe, and Bonnie is the other main character, and she's the owner. And she, for various reasons, does not want a wedding held in her cafe. So that's kind of the spark to how they meet, and the story goes from there.
Interesting. The cat cafe. We have one here in Denver. And I haven't
Okay.
gone, and I keep on wanting to go down there for it. Yeah, that's a very interesting idea. For those of you who don't know what a cat cafe is, it's a cafe that literally has cats in it that you can interact with while you're drinking coffee and having fun with friends, I guess. So have you been
Yeah,
to one, Karis?
Yes, and these are rescue cats, so they're adoptable, and that you get to go and kind of interact with them like in a home setting. And then the goal is to get them adopted out.
Which is so cool. So cool. I think that originated in Japan, which was a interesting thing. But yeah, that's so cool. I love that premise.
Yeah, I think they have hotels too that you go in and you can take one of their cats up to your room for the night. So
That would be nice. I'd like it with puppies too. So.
yeah.
Kris, how about you?
Here is my book, Catch. And it is about the first female offensive coordinator in the NFL for a new team called the Connecticut Cheetahs.
Connecticut Cheetahs.
Yeah. So it's
not real, is it? It's not
no, it's not real.
Okay.
Of course
Okay.
it's real. Of course it's real. It is. No, it's kind of a past present story. And in the past, she was her high school quarterback. Sutton McCoy was the high school quarterback, and she took her team to state. And so the past is where she has this whole football thing, and her dad is very supportive of her, and her school loves her, and she just has a really positive upbringing. And so she takes it, and in college she goes for sports medicine, and eventually gets an opportunity to intern at the NFL, then becomes I think a quarterback's coach, and it works her way up to she gets the opportunity to fill the spot of the offensive coordinator for this new expansion team. So she grabs it because why wouldn't she?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. That sounds great. I mean, I am not the biggest person for sports books for some reason. I like playing them, but I don't like watching them. And I don't like reading about them, but that sounds really fascinating.
It's more romance than it is anything else, but it does have a football presence, obviously, because that's what it's based around. And with the playoffs this weekend, I'm watching over here that the Bengals are now our competition for the championship game. So just an FYI, I love football. I love it, and I wish it was an opportunity. I thought, I'm going to do this. It's sports. I like to watch football, and I like to play basketball, but I just thought, it's time. I want to do something a little different. And so I just decided to go for it.
That is so cool. That's so cool. Did you have to do a lot of research to do that?
I loved the research. Yes, the research, the whole story. I mean, this could take all hour, but I had some really interesting paths and a lot of doors to break down to get the knowledge I needed to write this book in a convincing and real way.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Wow. That's so cool. We did a thing on research not too long ago, and it's interesting how much research has to go into a lot of books.
And it's not even like what you need for the book itself. It's just to have that cushion of knowledge in the back. So things will work. So, okay, does this really happen? It does. So this makes sense to do it this way. Even if that little bit of information doesn't actually make it into the book, it's still there, and it's meat behind the scenes that beefs up the whole story. So when we get to when we talk about the research, I do have a fun story to talk about. So,
Okay, cool. We'll
yeah.
cue that up. Don't let me
Okay.
forget about that.
Okay.
Krystina, how about you and your characters?
So my book is Lasting Beginning, right here, also back there. It is, I mentioned this a little bit a couple minutes ago, but my two main characters both work in real estate. The one is a commercial real estate broker. She does leasing for office towers, is one of the partners in her firm. And the other main character works as a general contractor. Neither one of these two jobs are ones that I have done, but I have worked very closely with both of them. And so I didn't have to do a ton of research for that. Though when we get to research, I have a couple funny stories too, because I'm a big fan of over-researching stuff that I will never use, but like to have, like Kris said, that cushion kind of in the back of like, if they need to say something, I want to make sure it sounds authentic, even if it's like one sentence. I want it to sound right. But in the story, it's kind of a workplace romance, even though they work for different companies, but they're Sky, the one main character, she's doing the leasing for the building, and she convinces the building owner, who she's pretty good friends with, that they should build a spec suite, which is basically taking a space in an office building that's like concrete floor, extra walls, and then a ceiling and nothing in there, and doing a speculative build out to make it easier for a new tenant to move in. And a lot of times those lease better because they're like ready to go, right? Plug and play. If you take a space like that, it probably takes 6 or 8 months for a new tenant to move in. So if you get the right size, you get a tenant in there, they can move in right away rather than having to wait 6 or 8 months to get permitting and do drawings and build everything out. So she convinces the owner that they should do this because you can command a premium rent. And Bailey is the general contractor. She's not normally an estimator, but her estimator retired. And so she has to go out and kind of get in the trenches a little bit. And it's kind of lust and then loathing at first sight. Bailey's kind of a hardhead and thinks that Sky is really stuck up. And Sky thinks that Bailey's a newbie because she's never met her before and thinks that all she's trying to do is throw up roadblocks as Sky's trying to like push this construction project through. So it kind of starts with them butting heads, and then there's some, glamorous-y ballroom gala things and more butting heads and families interfering, but a lot of workplace interactions too.
That's interesting. I'm hearing a lot of workplace interactions and enemies to lovers tropes here. This is pretty cool. How about you, Lesley?
Okay, my book was out in December. I have a feeling, seeing as I've got this behind me, that you're not going to see this. It keeps disappearing. So I'm going to tell everybody
right in front of your face.
There it is. Perfect. Oh, that's it. There we go.
Go on the bold stroke side, because the cover is absolutely fantastic. See me coming 3 miles off cover. Awesome. Book before this, I do a playing series where the different characters from the books will make a cameo in that series. And the one before this one was set in a restaurant. And I had the chance to like pick what other buildings I wanted nearby. And so I figured with most of them, with such a big restaurant, they'd have a big sports shop nearby. But my head went, but I'd really like a comic book store, because that's where I'd want to go. So as soon as I got that and I wrote it down, then the characters for that store started giving me their story while I'm still trying to write this other one.
Oh.
So it was like, okay, well, you wait your turn and I'll do this. For Playing Love's Refrain, you have Drew, who is the owner of the comic book store. She looks after her grandmother. So she's got 2 jobs going on at the same time. And next door to her is the restaurant called Takira's. And in Takira's is Ren. And Ren has just took the head chef job, where Drew is pretty much settled in her job. This was her dream job. This is what she wanted. She has her dream. Ren is still working on one day I'm going to have my own restaurant, but she's not entirely sure once she starts working at the Kira's if that's what she wants, because she finds that there's more of a family there than she would probably ever be able to have in her own place. And because they're in next door neighbors, at one point Ren has to go next door to the comic book store for Drew's grandma, but she meets Drew, and that's how their story starts.
Nice, nice. So we've also have places where people go. So there's a comic book store, a cyber cafe, and a cat cafe. This is interesting. So a lot of things coming together here. Very cool. So we're going to get to the research question in just a minute. But the one thing I would like to ask you is how integrated is the career of the person? And I think I already have the answer, having heard everything you're saying, but in your eyes, could you have written the same book with a different career? And we'll go ahead and start with you, Karis.
Short answer, no. The cat cafe idea was kind of the start of everything, and everything fell into place from that. Sometimes I start with a setting, sometimes a character, but in this case it was, I want to write a story about a cat cafe. So I think that I possibly could change the wedding planner, but it would be a completely different story at that point to get them to interact if there was a different reason for them coming into each other's spheres. So in this book, I think, and I think in a lot of my books, you can't really separate the characters and their careers because they're so passion driven, and they're so much a part of who the characters are, and who the characters are drives the plot and the romance. So it's an element that I don't think could be taken out and exchanged easily, unless it's like a dog cafe or something so similar that it's, really not a change.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I feel like I'm just making a guess here that most of you are going to say something very similar to it, because the professions are almost in the title of the book. Krystina, what about you? What about your book? Would it have been the same?
For sure in this book, I could not have changed them. The fact that it's a general contractor and a leasing person, I mean, they have to work together the way that they work together, and the story doesn't happen the same way if it isn't like that. Now, maybe my first book, Something Between Us, I think could have in the present day, right? They've got to both have that military background. Don't ask, don't tell, because that's what drove them apart when they were first together back a decade ago. But their present day occupations definitely could have been switched. I mean, they needed to be professionals downtown wearing suits, but they could have been almost any, fill in the blank downtown professional wearing heels and sunglasses and suit jackets and wandering around downtown. So in the first book, yes, it could have been interchanged. In Last New Beginning, definitely not. And right, like Karis had said, I mean, it would have been a different book had they had different careers, which maybe it's the book I'm writing now, that it's kind of similar, like personalities a little bit, but not really.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can see that. Dena, how about your characters?
So for this particular book, I don't think they could have had different careers. That was really the whole point of the plot of the book. And in my last one, Probability of Love, I had a bartender and someone attending a conference. So probably could have changed up the person who was attending the conference, what their profession was, but the bartending was kind of key to how they met. So I think it would have been a very different book. And the same thing with the new one, it would have had to be a different book. So, I mean, I've written some that I think that their careers could be interchangeable because it's more plot driven than it is careers, but not the last few I've written.
Interesting. Yeah. How about you, Kris?
Well, this is football quarterback and cheerleader versus offensive coordinator and quarterback's wife. So I couldn't have used any other job except for this. I mean, this is one of the first times, is that right? It's probably one of the first times I've used a career first to, well, that's not true because I did it for Scent. So, but this is really strong career book. If that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. It sounds like we're all, everybody on this panel is it's specific to their book, so that you were well chosen for this panel. Good job, Sandy. Okay, and then Lesley.
I think because it was needed for the location. Once I got in my head that there was going to be a comic book store right next to the restaurant, the best place for Ren to be was next door in that restaurant.
Awesome. Yeah.
And my other choice would have been the sport shop, and unlike Kris, I'm very sport deficient.
I'm the same way. I play a lot of them, but I don't know anything about it. Awesome. That's interesting. So now we're going to get into the research, but before we go there, what I would like to do is offer to the folks that are watching right now is that definitely feel free to go into the chat and talk about what's going on here. And if you have any questions or things that you'd like to talk to the authors about, feel free to put it into the Q&A. I'm monitoring that as well. I thought it was broken until I saw all credit for panel selection goes to Ruth from Sandy there. So I was thinking it was broken because they're both quiet right now. You're all very quiet. Must be very interested in you folks. So the next one is going to be about research. And since Kris brought it up first, I'm going to have Kris talk about the research that she did about the careers in this one, and how deep did you go? And it sounds like you went very deep. So.
Oh, I did. Yes. So I thought, well, because here's the problem, like this was researched, a lot of the research was during COVID and everything was shut down and it was real hard to reach people. And I watched a series on, I think it's Peacock, called Earning It. And it's about women in NFL. And it talks about how there are over 200 women in the NFL that we don't even, I'm like, what? And it's, I think a couple of years ago, we all knew about Katie Sowers during the Super Bowl, that she was one of the coaches there. And then all of a sudden we'd see like line judges or like referees in football. What is her name? Sarah Thomas, I think. She was the first female ref in NFL. And so I found this series and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like there are so many women in NFL that I didn't even know about. And so I reached out to several people after watching the series, and then just what I knew basically of like women that I've seen on TV in NFL. And I reached out to everybody and like nobody would get back to me. And I'm like, you would think that like they would want the world to know about women in NFL. And I like begged and pleaded and threw like BSB's name around and my name. And I tried everything to try to gather some momentum to get interest. And I couldn't find anything. Like nobody would get back to me. I had one coach, actually, she did get back to me, but she wanted like $10,000. And I'm like, I don't have that. So I went to Cameo. And I don't know if y'all know what Cameo is, but it's a place where you can get personal video messages from famous people, whether it's actors, actresses, sports people, musicians, and you can get them to do a video. And I had a couple of videos made for my mom. She loved Jamie Farr from MASH. So I just kind of went there on a whim. And I found Jennifer King from the Commanders, the Washington Commanders. She actually has, you can pay, I think I paid $35 for a Cameo video. And you send in like a message, like what you want them to say. And then they send you a video within a certain amount of time. And so I said, hey, this is who I am. I really need to talk to a woman coach in NFL. I need to see what it's like. I need to know that what I think it is what's actually the truth. And so I get this video message back from her. She's like, yeah, email me your phone number and I'll call you. So I had a really good conversation with her and a couple of emails back and forth. And like what she told me was completely opposite of what I thought. I thought there was going to be a lot of pushback at women coaches. I mean, because really, who wants to have a woman this is what I'm thinking. Like, how hard is it to have a woman coach, a woman telling you what to do if you're like this famous running back or famous quarterback? How well are you going to receive criticism and learning from a woman, a female. And she said it's the exact opposite. Everybody there knows that she is there for a reason. They hired her for her knowledge and they trust her 100%. Like what she tells them to do, they actually do without any sort of, back at her, any sort of backbite or anything like that. And I didn't expect that at all. I thought there would be more pushback, and she said, absolutely not. It's the exact opposite. So I was really surprised. So, and I also reached, there's a women's football league that exists in this country. How many people know about it? Very few. And Kansas City has a league, which I knew about sort of because it disappeared and then it came back under a different name. And I reached out and I actually did a Zoom with Kiki Blackman, who is the head coach of the Kansas City Glory. And she's also their offensive coordinator. So I had an incredible interview with her, just talking about women in sports. And so just like getting the interviews was the hardest part, to try to actually talk to somebody who could corroborate or actually, confirm everything that I thought. That was the hardest part, but it was also the most rewarding. I mean, after something like that, I'm like, hey, I have Jennifer King in my phone, and she's like on TV and she's coaching an NFL team. So the whole thing was such an incredible experience. I absolutely loved it. It was probably the best experience I had researching a book to date.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I would never even thought to go to something like Cameo to get
Yeah, I was desperate. I mean, I had been trying, I'm not kidding, for 6 months. I'd been trying to reach somebody like nonstop 6 months, and nobody would give me the time of day.
And had you not done that research, you probably would have maybe gone a little harder.
Right.
You don't know anything you're talking about to the coach. Kind of thing.
Right. So I just I would have made it more vague in my book, not so specific, or just knew exactly, things that I knew what to talk about. But just, yeah, it was completely different. So I'm so glad that I did have the opportunity to talk to both those coaches.
Wow. That's a testament to, how research does affect your books.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that story.
Thanks.
Lesley, do you need to, did you need to do a lot of research on comic book shops or the cafes?
I did a lot of research on comics, if that's me reading them, but I had a rough idea how a shop would run. I'd done job training years ago in a video store. So I got a rough idea for that. The restaurant I'd already, thankfully, researched for the book previous, but it was finding out what a head chef did and what she'd be dressed like that I had to do. It was easier thanks to Google. It was easier for this book than it was for me trying to work out what weapon I needed to shoot down a flying saucer for raging at the stars. So this was so much easier.
What kind of weapon do you need for that?
It was a very big rocket launcher that I found out through going on a Call of Duty game site. Because oddly enough, they don't really give you much idea on the internet what you actually need.
It's interesting.
For some reason.
Wow. It's interesting where your research will take you for certain things, right? They always say, as an author, don't let your research history or your internet history remain up there for too long. Otherwise, you might end up in prison or somewhere worse.
That was my biggest fear, because I was also researching guns and I thought, I'm going to be in so much trouble.
Yeah, or on a no-fly list or something, right?
And then they look at the next one, aliens, and they're like, leave her, just leave her alone. Yep.
And your next purchase at Amazon of aluminum foil, Krystina, what kind of research did you do? And, how did that, do you have any good stories, like alien rockets or?
Definitely no alien rocket gun, whatever, shooting UFOs out of the sky. There are no UFOs in any of my books to date, but we'll see. Maybe I'll work it in. But I find that sometimes I fall down these super obscure research rabbit holes. So in Last New Beginning, in my head, when I was plotting out the characters, Skye was much snobbier than she is actually in the book. And so in my mind, I had her watching Formula One racing and looking down her nose at NASCAR because, Formula One has athletes and NASCAR has whatever. Anyway, so in order to do the research for this book, I watched like 2 seasons of some Formula One racing show on Netflix, and legitimately there's like 2 sentences maybe in the book about it, but I spent all this damn time like watching this stupid show because I felt like it was going to be a bigger part, and it ended up being like it just came up once, and then Sky was like, I don't want you to think that I'm too snobby, so then she changed the subject. Like,
Interesting.
so I find that I fall down these rabbit holes that are essentially useless. In my first book, I spent probably 30 hours watching YouTubes on how to throw a dart appropriately, because there's a dart throwing scene where one of the characters is teaching the other character how to like throw a dart, and I'm very uncoordinated. I love to watch sports. I don't like to actually play or do any sorts of things that require hand-eye coordination. I mean, I needed some of that research, but I mean, the quantity of videos that I watched on how to do it was stupid. I could have spent my time much better.
Yes, I could see going down rabbit holes. I could go into a lot of thoughts around that in my past books, but it's not too bad about the darts. Are you a better dart player now?
I've not tried to throw a dart since then. I mean, it's all been during COVID, and well, I don't really have time to hang out at bars very often and just like throw things like darts. So I have not tried.
Oh, okay. So research stays research kind of thing for you. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it turned into words. At least it was more words than the 2 sentences in Last New Beginning about Formula One. That was sad.
And I was waiting for the comments to blast up about NASCAR and Formula One, the whole rivalry there. But Dena, how about you? What in your research came up that was interesting?
So I watched a bit of high school hockey, because there's a scene in there where there's a hockey game, and I wanted to have all the facts right on that. And basically I was looking for what the fans do, not necessarily what's going on in the rink. I mean, certain things that happen, during the 3 quarters and all that, but then it was more about what a fanatical fan would scream. So, which was actually kind of fun. But I did follow I can't even remember the town. It was a high school hockey team in upstate New York that actually televised their games. So it was pretty cool to watch some of that stuff. But a lot of the funny stuff, or the kind of crazy stuff I put in there, I found on YouTube about, fanatical fans and everything. And some of the slang I used, I found out there and stuff too. But that was interesting. I've been to a few hockey games in my life, and here we don't have a hockey team any longer, but you don't think about it, but even a puck, when I was at a game, a puck came over the glass, hit a guy square in the head. Yeah. And then he refused medical attention. It's just, you don't think of about that stuff happening, and then the cyber cafe stuff. I did have to research a little bit of the how many servers they have, what do they do with the servers? They have to wipe them every day. I kind of knew that, but I wanted to make sure my facts were correct. So, and then actually make sure that there are remote towns that don't have broadband and Wi-Fi. And some people think, well, that's not, really, there's none of that out there, but there are, and people live in those towns for specific reasons. So some of that was what I did research, and I found, a lot of that was pretty interesting. So
that's interesting. Yeah. Like I said earlier, coming from technology, you kind of have assumptions about certain things. And if you don't do the research, somebody's going to come out, and say, that doesn't happen, or that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Karis, how about you? What about your research that was interesting to you?
There wasn't, with this one, there's just not a lot available. So the research I like to do is sometimes reading biographies or memoirs of people who have had jobs, if there's something that I'm not really familiar with. But in this case, I'm going to count every single cat video I've watched on YouTube. That's my research. And I did a lot of that.
That's why I saved you for last, because I thought you were going to say you just watched a lot of cat videos, and you did it.
I just do that anyway. But I did research things like, because she liked the things she baked in her cafe the food she made, she liked to stay really local and seasonal. So I did do research into that and what's available in that area and the farmland around her and stuff, but mostly cat videos. So
Interesting. I think that you probably need to do a little bit of research on what keeps the cats from eating the food that's being served at the cafe, because I think that'd be the hardest thing, keeping those cats off the plates.
yeah, a couple of them bypassed that rule and
Oh,
got
okay.
into the kitchen. So
so we're gonna have to read it to find out what happened there. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. We do have a question in the Q&A, and this is specific to Lesley, but we'll see what we can do to make the question applicable to everybody. But it says, Lesley mentioned that while writing Playing with Fire, her newest book kept coming to mind. My question is, while working on a current work in progress, do your previous stories stay with you and perhaps confuse you? Or are you able to put them away and put those characters and stories behind you? And we'll start with you, Lesley, on that one.
Oh, they never get left behind. They're with me all the time. When Drew's, because as soon as I put down, okay, I'm going to have a comic book store, Drew already was in that store and I got her ready. So I wrote down as much as I could of what was immediately coming to mind. Then went back to Playing with Fire. But all the time that I was writing that, I got these new characters going, well, actually, if you do that bit, we can come in on that. So it was working on 2 books. I did the same with Raging at the Stars and Starstruck. One immediately started talking while I was still doing the other. I don't leave my characters behind. My playing ones always end up, you'll get cameos from those in the next books because I love them so much. I can't leave them behind.
Interesting.
I love the characters that they are and the community that was built in the playing books. And thankfully, a lot of the readers love them as well. So they don't mind that I'm going, yeah, and this one from that book's in. So no, there's a lot of voices going on in my head all at one time.
It sounds like
Very
it.
scary.
How do you keep them separate though? I mean, how do you you're saying that this character comes into this book. Do you drop, you said you drop little clues in there, but do you ever get confused about what's happening in the book that you're writing if you're thinking about the book in the future?
No, because they're always completely separate stories. And I do manage to go, okay, you're gonna have to wait. Your story will come next. Just let me finish this one, then I'll get to you. But they are set stories with what they're doing with the characters that I'm writing at that time. But it's always in the back of my head. It's like kind of when you have a song playing that you know that you're hearing it, but you're not really listening to that song, but you've got somebody constantly going on. It's like that. It's like writing Kate Bush, but hearing Taylor Swift. It's constant. It's great fun.
That's a good analogy, especially right now, because both of them are very popular now. Karis, what about your experience with your characters from different books? Do they get muddled up at all for you?
No, I have my romantic intrigues tend to be characters that will show up and I know that their stories are coming up in a later book. So I have to, if I do get an idea or something comes to mind for that, I have to write it down and just get it out of my head and away from me so I can focus on what I'm doing at the time. But when I'm doing those ones, I am always kind of thinking ahead to what will happen in their story. And so what has to happen to them now to get to that point. But with my other ones, and I love my characters, I don't want it to sound like that, but when I turn in the draft, it's gone and I'm looking forward to the next project, but it's like it's just gone. And then when I start working on editing, I get back into that world and back with those people and they feel real again. But that moment of finishing the draft and turning it in, I'm ready to do something new. Yeah.
Interesting. You gave some good advice there about just writing it down to get it out of your head. That's great. I mean, you know, psychologists say that if you have a worry or you wake up in the middle of the night worrying about something, write it down. That's a great bit of advice for writers. I like that.
Yeah, don't start thinking, oh, I'll do a chapter for that. Just make enough of a note and move on. Yeah.
That's good advice. I like that. Dena, how about you?
So they don't really run together, but you know, I've been in times when I've had 3 books going at once, and you know, you're starting a new one, doing a proposal, you're in the middle of writing one, and then you have edits. So you know, sometimes I just have to sit a week between and not look at edits until I'm finished with certain things on the current one that I'm writing. I think probably several of you have already have been in that situation as well. But I like, I have separate playlists. I have, you know, separate areas sometimes to write in because I don't want them to mesh together. Except, you know, I usually write early in the morning. Sometimes I'll do edits later in the evening instead of in the morning, because that's when I write. But they don't usually overlap.
Interesting. And that's even more advice about how to kind of keep your story separate by giving yourself a different space or a different process or a different time to write things. That's good advice too. Yeah. Krystina, how about you?
I might be a little different than most of the people on the panel. I mean, I write like 1 book every 9 or 10 months on a publication basis. So honestly, what's hardest for me is things like today, because I feel like I've already packed away Last New Beginning and kind of put it on the shelf. I'm done with it. I'm almost done with Ellie, one of the characters in Last New Beginning story. And so that is in the front of my mind. So when we're talking about books, I want to talk about the book that I'm actually writing, because I've been writing it for the last few months. I mean, I finished edits on Last New Beginning late summer, I think. And then, you know, you go into page proofs and everything, and then we don't touch the book for months. And then we're trying to remember, oh no, I need to go back to that book and remember the characters and the plot. And not that I forgot, I mean, I'm writing a book that kind of builds on the characters in this book. I kind of joke that the book I'm writing right now is almost the epilogue to Last New Beginning, because you see Skye and Bailey so much in this book, because Ellie's really good friends with Skye. So this is kind of the hardest for me, is trying to talk about the book that I finished months ago. But otherwise, I mean, my stories have kind of characters that overlap. Like there's probably even more than Easter eggs, because Ellie's such a prominent character in Last New Beginning, and then Skye and Bailey are such prominent characters in An Atlas Forever, which I'm writing now. So because I write in the same world, I think they kind of naturally go together, at least so far.
Interesting. Yeah, the process is a big part of that delineation part. Yeah. Kris, how about you?
Okay, I know we're running out of time, but my characters, they are off living their lives. I have put them in their happily ever after, and I don't think about them because, like Karis said, I've moved on to the next one. And every so often I'll go back and revisit, like, how are they doing? And sometimes they'll pop up, maybe like little Easter eggs in future books. But yeah, for the most part, I let them be. I've given them the life that they want, and I let them have their happily ever after.
Interesting. That's good. I mean, it's different people, right? Some people just can't let it go. Some people are good at doing that. You can hear that right here. So we have 2 questions in the Q&A, and we have about 5 minutes left to go on this panel. So we'll do these ones real kind of quick, not a speed round so much, but real quick answers on these ones. And I think they're interesting, and they're pretty kind of cool. The first question is, has anyone ever called you out that something you researched was wrong, and who was right? So without getting into a whole lot of description on that, think about that. And I'm going to start with you, Dena.
Yes, a few times. I'm going to say twice that I was right, and one time I was wrong. I didn't go as deep into the research as I should have. So it happens, you know, and they were all different books. On the current one, somebody called me out on nobody doesn't have internet. Well, that's not the case. But
yeah, that's so true. It's so true. Karis, how about you?
I'm assuming you mean people, not editors during editing.
Like in a review. Yeah, editors
You
don't
are
count.
always
I mean, they
right.
count a lot, but yeah. 'cause you get to
Editors
fix
always
that.
right. Other people. I'm sure there have been people who have written reviews that I try to not read them, good or bad. And so I'm sure there are people who have made comments about that, but I avoid it.
You avoid it. Okay.
Yeah.
Kris?
Yes, and they were wrong. I'm pretty diligent about my research, as you can tell. And I feel like mostly, maybe not so much as they're wrong as they just wanted it a different way. Or maybe they say that, yeah, this can't happen. This would never happen. Like Dena said, oh, there's no such thing as people not having internet. Like there totally is. I know all about that. And it's the truth. And so, but you can't say anything, you can't go back and say you're wrong. It's one of those things where you're just going to be like, well, I'm right. And I know I'm right. So you just got to shrug it off because there's nothing else you can do. But as far as editors, yeah, 99% of the time they're right. But that 1%, that's always the victory I have. Like, yes, I was right. And that doesn't happen. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. But when it does, I take that victory. So
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And you have a good point there. You can't really, unless you want to look like a jerk, you don't go.
yeah,
there
you can't go back.
Yeah. Yeah. Lesley?
I had somebody call out a rank in a police force, pretty much saying, well, you're British, therefore, you've got them wrong because I was writing for America. But I'd been in touch with somebody in America that was in the police force, and they'd give me the right rank.
Oh,
So,
interesting. Huh. Yeah. What are you going to do? Krystina?
So far, no. Knock on wood. I mean, I read my reviews, and I don't think I've ever read anything that somebody didn't like. And I can't think of anything. Though, Dena, I do want you to tell me all the places that that don't have Wi-Fi, because that's where I want a vacation.
Okay.
It's very hard to
say that.
There are lots of places in rural Oklahoma, and I'm not sure you want vacation there.
Right.
All right. Never tell me like
Never
the
mind.
good places, like mountains or islands. Like rural Oklahoma is not my jam.
Krystina, you're going to have to knock on wood about saying not so far. Okay. So you're the only one so far. So knock on wood.
Yeah,
So
right.
Okay.
Okay.
We have 1 minute to go. So let's go real quick on this one. When writing dialogue, do you ever speak it out loud or act out a bit of the scene to see how it sounds and flows? Or do you just write it down and leave it as words on a page? Dena?
Yes, all the time.
All the time?
Yeah.
Okay. Kris?
Act it out all the time. People think I'm like, something's wrong with me because I'm randomly just saying things. And my engineer is always like, what are you talking about? I'm like, never mind. So yeah.
It's the people in your head, right?
Right.
Karis, how about you?
No, I've tried, and it just feels too awkward. So I don't it never feels natural. But
You just
yeah,
write
I
it
can
down and
visualize
that's it?
them. Yeah.
Right on. Until you have to do your reading, right? Krystina, how about you?
Sometimes I like close my eyes and visualize, and sometimes I'll like mouth the words. Like I was weirdly writing a sex scene, I think last weekend. My wife was sitting on the other side of the room studying for the bar, and I feel like she looked over and was like, what in the hell's wrong with you? Because I had my like eyes closed, and I was like saying the dialogue quietly to myself.
Yes, no, right there.
We need to get her trained on our camera next time.
I do the very same thing, Krystina. My wife is always on me. Lesley, how about you?
yes, and with voices.
You hear the voices? You make the voices?
No, I make the voices.
Oh, all of them. You even change your vocalization, huh? Wow,
Yep.
that's crazy. That's awesome. Okay, so we've hit the end of our time here, and it was so wonderful talking to you. You were all so fun. If you would all just hold your books up again so everybody can see those beautiful covers that we've worked so hard on. And hopefully everybody in the audience had a great time. And please go out and buy these books. They all sound fascinating to me. I can't wait. And thank you very much for the questions that you put in there. So I appreciate it all.